Want to do a quick episode for you about how to add a psychiatrist to your therapy practice, because this is often a huge struggle. I was with a practice owner last night who was telling me about a group conversation she had with other therapy practice owners who are very, very smart. There's 7 or 8, I think, practice owners who are all looking to add a psychiatrist and really struggling to do it. So I wanted to give you a couple of suggestions here, as well as talk a little bit about the benefits of why you would want one. Some of them are going to be obvious, some of them may be a little less obvious. So let me start with 5 benefits I've written down here, and then I'm going to get into 3 or 4 creative approaches to hiring a psychiatrist. So on the benefits, they are helping patients in more ways, improving your margins, attracting more therapists, more high-quality therapists to your practice, ensure negotiating leverage, and the value of your practice at sale. So number 1, you all know that medication management and prescribing are opportunities that you're just not going to have with a pure therapy practice. So being able to serve your patients in more ways, especially in ways that are in demand, can be super valuable for your practice overall, for clinical outcomes, etc. Probably don't need to convince you of this. Number 2, margins. You can charge more for medication management and psychiatry. So you're able to not only get reimbursed by insurers at higher rates, but when it comes to cash pay, you can charge more. So that's a huge benefit. Number 3, a lot of the best quality therapists want to work with prescribers, want to work with psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, etc. So, and I think a lot of the really good quality psychiatrists and prescribers and nurse practitioners want to work with good quality therapists too. So quality attracts quality. And if you're able to get prescribers in your therapy practice when few other practices nearby can get them, you can attract a lot of the higher quality therapists who want to learn from psychiatrists and vice versa. Number 4, think about an insurance company. Think about how you can get negotiating leverage against them. Most group practices, because they don't have prescribers, are going to be less valuable to an insurance company than a practice that does have prescribers. You can serve a wider variety of patients. Probably they're going to have members of their network who really, really need medication management, need psychiatry. And if they can't get that elsewhere, you have a lot of power. If you were to threaten to leave the network, they're going to stand up and take notice because you would be leaving their network. You would be working with competitors, and you could serve those patients of competitors better. They're really, really going to be frightened by that. So it gives you a lot of negotiating leverage. And then number 5, your practice is more valuable with prescribers. It just is. An acquisition firm, an investment firm like ours is really going to take notice of a therapy practice that has been able to add psychiatry. You will be more valuable in the market because you have a rarer commodity. So let's talk about the how-to now. It's all well and good. You're probably convinced of the benefits. How do you add a psychiatrist? How do you add a prescriber or multiple prescribers to your therapy practice? I think at the core of this is that you want to build a therapy practice that delivers excellent client outcomes. You need to be worthy of prescribers. And this isn't to say that prescribing is more impactful or important in the mental health landscape than therapy. I don't believe that. But we do want to build a therapy practice that delivers excellent clinical outcomes, because that's going to be attractive to prescribers. High-quality prescribers are going to want to know that you're good at what you do. The reality is there is a hierarchy. It's not necessarily fair, but psychiatrists see themselves, maybe arrogantly, but they see themselves at the top of a hierarchy. And they will sort of sit in judgment, even some of the ones that you would want to work with. And so you should do the same to them, by the way. You should judge them. You should do due diligence on whether they're able to produce good client outcomes. The reality is they can very often on their own command more obvious business opportunities. They offer a higher margin service than therapy typically is. And so that ability to generally, if they're somewhat entrepreneurial, build a business on their own gives them a lot of leverage. So there's the status hierarchy, and then there's the financial aspect of things. And they often just have a lot of power. So they'll need to be convinced. And they also are not always fair in how they judge therapists. So at the core of what you want to do is build a therapy practice that delivers excellent, demonstrable clinical outcomes so that you can make a case to a psychiatrist. Thought number 2 I have for you. You may not actually need to hire a psychiatrist at all or right away. You could potentially just hire a nurse prescriber. The laws vary from state to state about whether you can do this or how to do this. Some states are going to require that a psychiatrist supervise in a relatively close way a nurse practitioner. Other states will not. Other states, you can pretty much just hire a nurse prescriber and a psychiatrist could supervise from a distance. Nurse practitioner lobbies are fighting more and more aggressively across the country to get independent prescribing rights. And so that battle is ongoing. And you may in your state just be able to hire a nurse prescriber where the economics are often better. It's often easier to make the case to them than trying to hire a psychiatrist. So you could explore whether you could just hire a nurse prescriber rather than a psychiatrist. But let's say you really, really want a psychiatrist. It has to be a psychiatrist in your state. How do you do that? So I'm going to give you 3 approaches. Actually, I'm going to give you 4 approaches. The first is to add a psychiatrist advisor to your practice. The second is to find a psychiatrist with a small practice. The third is to hire one right out of school. And the fourth is to work with a firm like ours, an investment firm that has credibility and has either connections with psychiatrists or the expertise and knowledge and credibility to add a psychiatrist. So those are 4 approaches. Let's start with the first, adding a psychiatrist advisor. Maybe you find a psychiatrist who is retired. They're not able to come on board full-time. They don't actually want to see patients, but they still want to work. They want to keep their hands a little bit dirty. They want a side gig. They want, to bring a sense of purpose and contribution to their lives. Find a retired psychiatrist in your area and bring them on board as an advisor. Maybe you pay them a little bit. Maybe you don't. Maybe you give them some equity in your business, right? But a retired psychiatrist can give you credibility, can also help with legal compliance, where in certain states, if you want to bring on a nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist, you may need to have a medical entity, may need to be owned by a psychiatrist. They could serve that purpose for you. You're going to definitely want to know the law in your state around what's required to bring in a psychiatrist. If you don't, I can introduce you to the right lawyer. You can also start out with ChatGPT, but you're going to want probably the right lawyer to help you out here. Just write me an email, dan@firesidestrategic.com. I can probably make an introduction for you. And you're going to want to have the legal side really, really buttoned down. But a psychiatrist advisor can help with the credibility, find the right psychiatrist. And even if you find the psychiatrist and they don't, they can bring credibility into the conversation. If you go into the conversation with a psychiatrist who really knows their stuff, that could impress the psychiatrist that you want to hire, right? So that's thought 1. Bring on a part-time advisor, someone for credibility boosting. Number 2, find a psychiatrist with a small practice. Maybe it's a woman psychiatrist who is raising a family for a few years and wants to get back to the workforce. Maybe it's someone in an unconventional situation who hasn't quite found the right fit. A psychiatrist with a small practice, may not be the most entrepreneurial. They may actually want to be an employee. Just like a lot of the right clinicians that are going to be with you for a long time have an employee mindset. Find a psychiatrist who's maybe a little less entrepreneurial, who just wants a job, doesn't want to be bothered with any of the paperwork, want to be bothered with the admin. Number 3, take a look at psychiatrists who are just graduating from school in your area. Hiring someone right out of school who's able to be molded, who may be a bit more humble. They're probably more likely to be a little bit more open-minded. Try to build a pipeline. Take a look at the medical schools in your area. Look to hire someone right out of school. And I think if you did the first suggestion of a psychiatrist advisor, that could be a really powerful pitch to someone who's right out of school, who's open-minded, who really wants to learn from therapists. And then the 4th concept is work with a firm like ours. So we have credibility here. We know psychiatrists, we work with excellent psychiatrists, and we're able to, in conversations with psychiatrists, we're able to be credible. That really matters. And we have the expertise to know how to create interdisciplinary partnerships between psychiatrists and therapists, between nurse prescribers and therapists. Not everyone has that expertise or that knowledge. And as investors, right, if we invest in a company, we have every incentive to grow it. That incentive to grow it often means adding services. So it could mean adding psychiatry, adding nurse prescribers. It could mean adding psychological and neuropsychological testing. It could mean adding Spravato, TMS. All of these services are within our wheelhouse, and our incentive to help you add services is very, very strong if we invest. And probably there are other investment firms out there that do something similar to what we do. So working with a firm like ours is a way to both get an investment as a financial investment, as well as bringing on a psychiatrist. Typically, now this is the self-serving portion of the episode, we will typically buy a majority of therapy practices, and we buy that majority. And so the cash associated with that purchase, most of it you get to keep. Because in general, the mental health business is not a very cash-intensive business. It doesn't require a ton of cash to grow businesses. So most of the cash that we use to buy a stake in your practice, you get to keep. So you get to take chips off the table, and at the same time, you bring on an investor who is motivated to help you grow. And part of that motivation, as I say, is going to be adding services. So we have some very sharp people who know how to add services, and typically for us, medication management and psychiatry are at the top of the list. We see just a ton of demand across the country. We're very motivated to bring our expertise to bear to help you find the right psychiatrist who's a good culture fit, as well as a good fit to serve your patients. Those are some of the benefits of hiring a psychiatrist, and those are 4 unconventional approaches to hiring a psychiatrist, because you may be struggling at the moment. You may really want to do it, but you may be struggling to bridge that credibility gap. So those are some ways to go about doing it. I wish you the very best of luck with your practice, and shoot me an email anytime at dan@firesidestrategic.com. That's dan@firesidestrategic.com. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.